They put me at the end of the table, so close to the kitchen door the heat hit my back with every swing. I listened to silverware scrape and forks hit plates, tried to ignore the hush when someone said, "Well, at least she's here now scrubbing floors instead of files." I looked down at my hands, pretending not to hear, the cracked wine glass in front of me, reflecting a face I barely knew. No one asked about the nights I spent under foreign skies, or the weight I carried home on my shoulders. They chewed silence like stale bread, while I swallowed the burn in my throat. Then the door opened. A man in uniform paused, eyes scanning, locking on me. His voice low but clear. "Ma'am." "Captain." Chairs creaked. Conversations died. Eyes widened in disbelief. "Before I share my story, I want to know you're here with me. Just say hi in the comments. Tell me where you're watching from. And if this story moves something in you, consider subscribing." The chair they gave me was closest to the swinging door. Every time it opened, a gust of cold air brushed my back and rattled the silver tray in the server's hand. I sat angled off the main table, watching light fall in strange patterns on the wall. Warm gold that turned faces to statues, carving half in glow, half in shadow. Voices carried, blurred by clinking glasses, but none of them formed words meant for me. Someone laughed at the other end, lifting a crystal flute, and the sound cracked through the hush that seemed to settle around my seat. I could smell the roast, the butter, the old cologne my father still used, the powdery floral on my mother's wrist when she touched my shoulder without really looking at me. "Glad you made it," she said softly, her eyes drifting to check the roast. A cousin passed, grip limp in greeting, gaze sliding over my face like I was furniture. Another relative paused to smile, too wide, too bright, praising how well Emily handled everything, so calm, so polished. I nodded as if the words weren't meant to slice. When Emily spoke, her voice carried clear and easy, drawing small nods and polite questions about her plans, her fiancé's promotion. I watched her hold court at the center of the table, candlelight catching in her hair, every eye reflecting back her shape. My own plate stayed half-touched, fork resting at an angle, waiting for something that wouldn't come. The server asked if I was done. I shook my head without speaking, fingers wrapped around the stem of my glass. The rim felt slick with condensation. I lifted it, just to see the light slide across the fractured line near the base. A hairline cracked that hadn't given way yet. My breath made a fog on the glass before fading. Conversation moved on without me, a shifting tide I wasn't meant to swim in. Emily laughed at something, tilting her head back, wine catching red in the cut crystal, her words melting into the applause at the far end. I adjusted my seat, felt the leg of the chair scrape the tile, heard the low clink of forks against plates, distant, hollow. I pressed my palm against the tablecloth to steady my breath. From the corner of my eye, the old family portraits on the wall watched without blinking. Someone dropped a spoon. The sound rang sharp, then died. I didn't move. They set the table without counting me. A long row of flickering candles bending shadows across the plates. One chair angled too close to the drafty window, so every shift of wind brushed cold along my side. When they called people to sit, I hesitated, waiting for someone to point, but no one did. I pulled the chair closer in a small scrape against the tile that seemed louder than conversation. A framed photo on the buffet caught my eye. All of them posed at last year's gathering, my space on the end trimmed clean away, the edge of the frame too neat, too final. "Leah?" someone said, voice lifting like they weren't sure they had it right. I turned before I could nod, and they'd already moved on, passing a dish down the line without looking back. The sound of a spoon stirring coffee in a cup hit too hard, too offbeat, like no one bothered to keep time. My mother leaned in near the carving tray, breathing her old rosewater scent that used to mean warmth, saying, "Make sure it's hot for everyone," without meeting my eyes. I watched her tap the roast pan, her rings glinting in the shifting candlelight, while my own fingers lay still on the tablecloth. The seat beside me stayed empty most of the meal. A server tried to slide a bowl my way but paused, placed it on the sideboard instead. Across the table, they praised Carter for arranging the flowers. Flowers I remembered buying last year, but no one remembered me arranging. "He's always so thoughtful," someone said, and glasses clinked soft approval. My name didn't come up again. Marilyn called me Lena, but turned away before she finished it, voice dropping as if embarrassed for using it at all. When she turned back, she was already praising Emily for holding everything together so gracefully. I watched Emily smile, catch the candlelight, flickering gold against the wall, while my own reflection in the window split across the old wavy glass. I tried to speak once, throat clearing, but the topic had shifted before I finished the breath. Talk turned to travel plans I wasn't part of, questions about a recipe I hadn't tasted. My hand wrapped around the wine glass, thumb tracing the bead of water down the stem, not drinking. The rim cooled against my lip, and I set it down without sound. Conversation bent away from me like branches in wind. I adjusted the napkin in my lap, though it didn't need it, pinched a fold tight between thumb and forefinger just to keep still. Someone laughed at the far end of the table, rich and easy, the sound bouncing off the walls lined with old family portraits, faces all turned in the same direction, none of them looking at me. The wind pushed through the window seam again, catching the corner of the tablecloth, so it rippled like breath. The candle nearest me guttering low, then flaring, sending my shadow up the wall in broken shapes. I didn't move, just watched the edge of my chair shift a fraction with the draft. The faint scrape lost under the hush that followed someone else's joke. They had him stand at the head of the table, the overhead pendant light settling clean on his face, while the rest of us blurred into soft shadow. "Look at Ethan," someone said, voice lifting with easy warmth. "He's just so natural there." Another chimed in, "Ethan, would you mind carving? You're the best at this." The knife caught the light as he nodded, a calm, practiced smile on his lips, and the reflection trembled over the polished platter. I watched the shape of his shoulders square exactly where I remembered the table pulling you forward. That place needing someone sure, someone seen. Applause rippled as he began, not hurried but deliberate, each slice even. "Beautiful, Ethan," they repeated, louder this time, a laugh breaking across the group. My mother clapped softly at first, then firmer, leaning in toward the glow while the rest of us leaned back. "That's perfect, Ethan," she said twice, her voice gentler than I recalled it ever sounding. A cousin lifted his glass and called Ethan's name again, toasting so naturally that even the crystal seemed to echo it. I heard the chair shift closer, tightening the circle, closing the space. Someone remembered to say Leah once, quiet, like checking if I was still there, then looked away before the sound even died. I opened my mouth to respond, but they'd already turned, questions spilling toward Ethan about timing and spices and how he always made things easier. He didn't boast. He just nodded once, steady, agreeable, the knife settling with a satisfying click against the cutting board. My fingers curled around the glass stem until the chill bled into my palm. The wine inside stilled, dark, unreadable. I tried to lift it halfway, felt my throat tense dry, and set it back with too much care. Conversation built around me like a wall, voice after voice layering polite jokes and praise, all of them angled one way. I caught the edge of myself in the mirror behind the buffet, blurred, backlit, slightly warped where the old glass buckled. Ethan's reflection was crisp, centered, anchored by the neat line of the tablecloth running straight to him. I watched my own outline hover, thinner than it should have been, as if the candlelight couldn't hold me in focus. A pause fell as someone adjusted a chair like scraping the floor. Then the room erupted in laughter at something Ethan said. The sound rose and fell like a wave, washing past my ears before fading into corners. My hand rested on the table, flexing once, then settling. I adjusted the napkin without need, straightening a crease, only I noticed. The shadows flickered against the wall behind him, his silhouette clear, cut sharp by the swing of the light, while mine broke apart over the uneven plaster, disappearing where the chairs stood too close. The applause ebbed out slowly, leaving only the scrape of utensils, a cough, The hush of someone's breath held too long and let go too carefully. I didn't move. I leaned forward a little, fingers brushing the base of my glass, turning it slowly so the rim caught the glow from the candles and sent dull sparks onto the white tablecloth. My voice found the edge of a sentence before it found the words, just a quiet breath shaping something I'd almost forgotten how to say. I cleared my throat softly, eyes flicking toward the cluster of faces, searching for one that might stay still long enough to hold what I wanted to share. There was this one time. I started, tone low, careful, afraid it might sound too raw if I let it all out at once. I paused, pressing my thumb along the condensation trailing the glass stem. My other hand opened a little on the cloth, palm up, hoping someone would see the invitation. The words trembled there, unfinished. The light overhead wavered as someone adjusted in their seat, shadows bending. I tried again, gentler. I remember. I wanted to tell you a bit. But then laughter cracked sharp at the far end, ringing against silverware. Ethan's name rolled off two voices, bright and practiced. Ethan, you're hilarious. And again, Ethan, seriously, tell that story. The table burst in a round of approving noise, glass meeting glass in a clumsy cheer, liquid sloshing with the careless certainty of belonging. My voice slipped under theirs, flattening, the half-formed words sucked away in the rush of warmth that wasn't mine. The candle near me guttered low, before finding air, throwing its shine further from my face. I watched the light settle clean on Ethan's hands as he gestured modestly, still talking, still holding them all. My own fingers closed slowly, pressing the napkin edge into a neat fold I didn't need to make. I felt the cloth pull beneath my palm, smoothing wrinkles that weren't there. My gaze drifted up, catching the dull reflection of myself in the window. Bent, warped, split by the wood framing so my eyes didn't line up right. I let my mouth stay open for a second longer than it should, trying to catch the thread of my own voice before letting it go. The breath I drew came thin, lodged somewhere too high in my chest, and left me with only enough force to close my lips without sound. I blinked, scanning the table. The faces angled away, nodding in time with his words. The hush that settled was only for him, only ever for him. My hand found the glass again, but I didn't lift it. I only turned it once, carefully, watching the waterline shift against the sides, feeling the chill bleed through. Then I set it down deliberately, fingers pressing against the base until it stilled. I shifted my chair back a fraction, enough that the leg bumped the rug's edge with a muffled thud, enough that I could straighten my spine without leaning in any more. Someone told a joke that didn't need me to laugh. My eyes tracked the trail of the napkin I'd folded, thumb stroking the crease flat one more time before letting go. The candle flickered once and stilled. The last sound I registered was the dull tap of a spoon against porcelain, tapping out a rhythm no one waited for me to join. I watched them turn to him again, the light finding Ethan first, glancing off the curve of his glass, the line of his collar, that soft even tone he used filling the space so easily. Someone said his name twice, clear as crystal catching sun. Ethan. Really? You make it all look so simple. Then again, Ethan, don't you dare be humble. Laughter rising. A clean, agreeable sound held no edges. I kept my eyes there, not really blinking, seeing something I wasn't sure was happening. The way his hand rested on the carving knife, like it had always been there. His smile timed to the hush. The nod of thanks, like it was practiced. Meant for them, meant to be seen, I thought of. No, not quite. Just a flicker, a shape of memory not staying put. A laugh I couldn't remember the end of. Like my fingers flexed against the napkin, pinching a fold, releasing it, turning the stem of the glass an inch, watching the light slip down the side, gathering in the base like something waiting to spill, but not quite moving. I shifted in my seat, the leg catching the edge of the rug so it didn't slide smoothly. My breath slowed without asking me first, pressing careful against my ribs, not wanting to make noise. The glass touched my lip and stilled. Nothing poured. Nothing moved. I caught the window behind him in my sight, not fully clear, our shapes pressed together in the reflection. But his edges sharper, mine fading where the frame split the view. I tried to see if I was even there, or just leftover gloss on the pane. A trick of the candle behind me, refusing to hold its flame. A trick of the candle behind me. I swallowed without drinking, felt the cool stem under my fingers shift as I let it rest back on the table. A hush between words that wasn't mine to fill. A half breath left over. I watched my own shoulder drop, weight settling lower. No Proust. The line of my arm angling away, further from the centerpiece, further from the spill of gold light spreading like spilled honey across the plates. Pool. My gaze didn't hold there anymore. Sliding down to the table's edge, the shine dulling toward the floor, seeing only the dimmer wash where the candle's glow didn't reach, the hard shadow falling at my feet, bending as I moved nothing at all. I watched the room through the low glow of candles, the light sliding over glass and polished cutlery, reflecting small bursts where laughter broke open, like a soft drum. They lifted their glasses slowly, deliberately, naming Ethan again, the sound of his name rounding the table, cushioned by the warmth in their voices. My eyes tracked the arc of liquid catching gold, settling, the way it was offered to him, without a second thought. My fingers rested on the napkin edge, folding the crease flat, then smoothing it again. Breath held like something might stop me, might keep me, but there was no glance my way, no voice rounding to include the empty space. I pressed the fabric once more between my fingers, slowly, careful not to leave any line but the one I made, waiting for something that didn't come, the edge of the table cool under my palm. I let the napkin fall in its shape, not dropped, just released, my fingers brushing the cloth with one last pass, my other hand gathering the sleeve of my coat, pulling it across my lap without hurry. The chair shifted under me, slow scrape of wood on tile, too quiet under the low murmur and sudden peaks of laughter. I felt the hem of the coat brush my wrist, heavy with its own weight, not yet on weight. No one paused, no one angled their shoulder, the conversation staying rounded in its own gravity. I let my fingers press the back of the chair, easing it just enough to straighten its line with the table, the legs aligning, the cushion still warm, my arm brushing the edge once, twice, then falling back to my side. I stood not all at once, but in small shifts, as if gravity would hold me in place if I moved too fast. The floor under my shoes gave a muted tap, leather on tile, lost under the clink of glasses raised, the low resonance of someone humming along to music leaking from the corner speaker. My thumb hooked the collar of the coat, pulling it over one shoulder, then the other, slow, deliberate, fingers working the fabric smooth, without looking down, the lining cold against the back of my arm. I reached the door of my knuckles grazing its frame, the grain of wood meeting my skin, the brass cool under the pads of my fingers. I didn't turn the knob immediately, just felt the small tremor of my breath in the hollow of my chest, waiting for the silence that wasn't there, the laughter still rolling in waves, muffled, pushing at the edge of my hearing, the glass behind me catching the candle's flame and splitting it in a smar of. The chair I left sat neat, squared to the table, napkin folded across the plate, the glass still half full, light playing in ripples across the surface, unbroken, the candlelight leaning into it but not warming it, the shadows drawing long along the floorboards, spilling into the spaces between chairs, filling in the places where I might have been, where no one seemed to look. He was there arranging the flowers, fingers careful on each stem, leaning in just enough for the scent to catch the light around him. Someone called his name, the syllables carrying clear through the low hum of voices, the candle wicks flickering like small applause, his laugh answering theirs, a soft chord strummed too easily in the warm yellow pool at the table's center. I watched his hands press the napkin flat, fold it once, slide it under the edge of a plate, slow and measured, a motion that tugged somewhere behind my ribs, The sound of silver scraping ceramic felt too familiar in my ears. My fingers shifted on the glass, grip loosening, tightening, the condensation leaving faint prints. I wiped away, without thinking, the napkin in his hand. Fluttering once as he said it, the voices layered over one another, praising, repeating his name like a shared prayer. Someone said it wrong at first, then corrected themselves with a quick laugh that smoothed everything, the echo of it warm on the walls. My eyes fell to the reflection in the side cabinet, glass dulled and streaked but catching the shape of him clear, lit steady. My own outline behind it, bending at the edges. I moved just enough to shift the chair leg back, careful not to scrape too loud, the floor giving a quiet protest that no one noticed. My hand on the stem of the glass, paused, then settled it back onto the cloth, the ripple in the liquid smoothing to a perfect sheen, my chest a small careful rise and fall, watching him adjust the cutlery at just the right angle. The table seemed to lean toward his voice, laughter spilling out in gentle shoves, heads turned his way, the candlelight gathering close to their faces while the outer edges of the room cooled to pale gray. My chair eased another inch back, space folding between elbows and plates. My foot found the floor seam and rested there, unmoving. I watched the way the mirror caught us both, his image clean, shoulders framed by the edge of the wooden cabinet, mine breaking at the join, blurred in the middle like it couldn't decide whether to hold me whole. His hands resting on the table like an answer, mine on my lap, thumbs smoothing an invisible crease in my skirt, breath moving once in, half out. Not enough to finish a word, just the shape of something that might help. He paused as he passed, tray balanced on one palm, eyes flicking down to the edge of my plate, then up to my face, slow enough to register, not rushing it away like most did. The candlelight caught in the crease of his sleeve as he shifted weight, a small nod, barely there. But there, the glass in his other hand lowered gently, resting against the cloth with a sound softer than... I watched his fingers press the napkin closer to the edge, straightening it, not mine, not his, just the table's to hold. His gaze stayed a moment longer than needed, before moving on, no words, just the light adjusting over his shoulder as he turned. His steps measured, deliberate, the sound of shoes finding tile in careful rhythm, pulling warmth across the space and leaving it trailing behind him. My hand shifted on the glass, thumb tapping once against the stem, breath caught at the edge of ribs before leaving slow, eyes tracing the small ring of moisture it left behind on the table, a mark someone else might wipe away without noticing. I held it there, just long enough to see it blur, the reflection of the flame above. Behind me, someone at the table said my name, clipped, mispronounced, falling into the conversation like a placeholder, not expecting me to answer, turning back before the sound finished landing. A laugh smothered the moment, Ethan's name spoken with certainty twice, once in thanks, once in praise, the silver clink of forks making room for his words. Once in praise, the silver clink of forks making room for his words. He turned toward them, shoulders settling, his own napkin folded with care, I remembered, but under someone else's palm now. He brushed a stray petal from the floral centerpiece, realigning it with a casual precision that reminded me of something I'd done once without thinking. My eyes dropped, finding the small crease in the tablecloth that hadn't flattened, my fingers brushing over it once, slow, not to fix it, just to feel it one. The server returned on another pass, this time with nothing in hand, but paused just enough to straighten the chair at my side. Quiet motion, cloth rustling against wood, a breath given shape, his eyes meeting mine briefly with a flicker that didn't ask anything. "Just stayed, Mom," he said low. Not loud, no flourish, and moved on, the syllable hovering in the air after him like a thread kept. My shoulders eased by half an inch, not more, the exhale thin and quiet. My hand rested again around the base of the glass but didn't lift it. the rim gathering the candle's glow without throwing it back. Eyes falling to where the napkin lay folded beside the plate, neat now, undisturbed, waiting for no one in particular. The reflection in the polished spoon showing just enough of me to prove I was still there, not enough to hold steady. He stood just beyond the curve of the table, face caught in the split of warm light and soft shadow. His eyes lifted once, grazing mine without holding. The laughter around him low and even, leaning in but never touching the space between us. I watched the line of his mouth ease into a small smile meant for someone else, the candlelight catching one cheek, leaving the other in quiet disgust. I let my breath stay behind my teeth, shallow, paused, the distance close enough to see the crease of his cuff, the way fabric folded neat against his wrist. No tremor there, no flicker asking anything. The chair leg pressing cool against my shin, unmoving, the sound of silver hitting china behind us. A chime too careful to be sharp. Voices folding over his name without mine. Memory fluttered at the edge, blurred. His head turning once, a nod that felt like closing a door. Arms folding slow across his chest, the shape of shoulders refusing space. The tap of a spoon tipping from a saucer, rolling half a circle before resting silent, light thrown past his side onto the floor, thinning to pale threads across old wood, thinning to pale threads across old wood. I felt the napkin under my palm shift with the small movement of fingers pressing it flat, no word following, the fabric giving way without resistance. Eyes drifting to the rim of my glass where water curved in stillness, waiting for something to break its line. My lips closed over nothing, chin tucking down just enough to lose his face in the candle's edge. Lashes pressing once, slow, leaving the room in blur. No call, no step forward, the weight in my chest flattening, pressing down with the slow exhale I didn't hear. My shoulders softened, not slumping. Just less, my fingers let the napkin go, edge of it falling back onto the table, like it belonged there, not needing to be held. The space between us stayed measured, polite, untouched. One step back, slow enough the chair didn't scrape. My heel finding the seam in the floor, settling, the glow of the pendant lamp pooling warm on the center of the table. Chairs catching that shine along polished backs. One seat left neat, angled right, waiting, right, wait, light, wait, angled right, waiting, light bending to hold everything. But I stepped in slow enough for the door not to creak, letting the light spill past me first, warm pools across the floorboards, the same lamp overhead that once lit my shoulders, catching the gloss of that chair's back, the worn edge I used to grip when leaning forward to listen, to speak. The napkin I'd folded just so once, now lying crisp, uncreased, ready for someone else's hand. My eyes moved across the table, lingered on the small frame, resting by the centerpiece. The photo I remembered taking, angled to show the best of the room, now angled just so that my corner fell out of focus, blurred in the depth of field, while everyone else held sharp. The candle beside it flickered, casting shadows that didn't settle on me. I watched them gather, voices rounded in laughter, heads tipped in easy nods, the clink of glass offered forward. "To you," they said, his name rolling natural on their tongues, no pause to question it. The chair at the head pulled back, just enough for him to sink in comfortably, hands resting easy on the arms, the light pooling on his chest, catching his smile. Full, no one shifting to make room for anyone. He reached to adjust the flowers, thumb brushing a petal back into place, not hurried, not forced. The motion matched the hum of voices belonged there. I remembered the way those stems used to lean for me, the water I once measured out so they wouldn't wilt too soon. But no one asked how they'd lasted this long. No mention of who'd chosen their color. The words around him didn't trip. They fit, lined up smooth, no stutters, no glances my way for confirmation. no small space held for my voice. My name didn't cross any lips, not even by accident. Nothing to fill the air that softened around him like an invitation answered. My fingers brushed the edge of the table, tracing the grain that ran too straight, too even, finding no splinter to catch on, pressing once, then lifting. Leaving no mark, my eyes dropped to the floor, where the light stopped just shy of my feet, the shine dulling to shadow before it reached my shoes. I eased one step back, felt the give of the floorboard settle under my weight. No creak, no warning, my breath slower, measured, the sleeve of my coat sliding along my wrist with its own sound, quiet enough not to interrupt anything. The laughter held steady, the glow stayed warm at the center of the room. The chair at the head stood firm, occupied, angled right, its back catching the glow in an unbroken line. Napkin still neat, glass half raised, ready for another toast. The light finding all of it, while the shadow I left behind eased back into the wall, slow enough that no one needed to shift to make room. I sat still, fingers resting at the edge of the napkin, eyes lifted just enough to catch the podium, where the microphone crackled once before settling into steady breath. The voice warm and clear, naming someone else, saying it twice for emphasis, the syllables filling the hall without hurry, describing every small thing so carefully it felt carved, mentioning how they'd stayed late, made sure every detail was perfect. My back straightened a fraction, the line of my shoulders tightening, eyes narrowing, just enough to focus, breath held behind teeth as the words fell, each detail a match to what I remembered my own hand setting, the angle of a place card, the color of the candles, but the name wasn't mine, not once, not even close. The microphone carrying it out across the room without apology. The applause started in small bursts, then gathered weight, spreading in a roll that hit every corner, hands meeting hands with dull finality. Faces turned to the spotlight that found the one standing, smiling, chin lifted, the light bending over their hair in soft arcs, a nod given back, easy, expected, the hum of approval tightening the air, no stutter, no question, just acceptance folding around them like a well-worn coach. I caught movement near the front, a head turning, eyes flicking toward me once, halting, held, the glint in them pausing like it wanted to speak, just enough to feel the shake under the ribs. Then it dropped, gaze falling to the floor, mouth pressing shut, their hands coming together in slow, obedient claps, blending back into the crowd that kept time so perfectly, the sound of it falling around me like slow rain on old. My fingers shifted on the napkin, feeling the weave catch at the edge of my nail, dragging across the seam with no purpose, no motion to fix it, just the slow rub of skin against cloth. The glass beside me still full, rim unmarked, catching the overhead glow and fracturing it into dull halos across the table, my thumb grazing the stem before settling it back down. Quiet, deliberate. I let my shoulders ease by degrees, the breath leaving me in measured weight, lips pressing together without tremor, eyes dropping to watch the way the light pooled on the table's polished surface, finding the lines in the wood that curved without end, the sound of the applause dulling to something steady, unbroken, the glow of the spotlight staying fixed, warm in all the places I no longer sat. I stood slow, letting the chair ease back without sound, fingers brushing the fabric of my coat draped over the arm. The light inside fell warm on polished wood, leaving my face half in glow, half already claimed by the dim. No one turned, no name called. The laughter stayed round and steady, flowing around corners I no longer fill. I stepped toward the door, weight shifting with care, heels muted on old floorboards, wind curling through the frame to touch my collar, hair lifting just enough to catch breath. My shoulders softened, the slope of my spine unforced, moving because there was nowhere left to stay still. My hand found the knob but paused, resting, the metal chill pushing through my palm without haste. Beyond the glass, I saw them all. Blurred edges pressed against bright walls, the chandelier blooming gold overhead, faces caught in mid-laugh. Forks raised, no space at the table empty. No one waiting for a shift in light. My own reflection a half-cut smudge in the pane. Mouth a pale line without curve. Eyes hollow enough to let the room show through. They didn't falter, not once. The toast rose without catching. The name they cheered clear, unbroken. Voices in chorus so complete, it filled the air even on this side of the glass. I stood quiet, watching it swell and settle again. A world sealed shut around the shape I used to fit. The glow staying locked where they wanted it. My fingers left the knob, falling to my side, brushing the fold of my coat with the back of a knuckle. Fabric bending with no resistance, breath moving slow, flattening against ribs, held and let go without tremor. My gaze lowered to the floor where light from inside thinned to a dull thread, catching only the edges of my shoes before falling away. I stepped once more, not fast, not forced, coat settling over my arm in a gentle sweep, the air outside catching me clean, cooler but not unkind. My chest rose and fell steady, mouth closed, unmoving, eyes pushing past the glow leaking out the window. Nothing asked, nothing promised back. The sound of my exhale, the only thing I took with me. I felt the hallway narrow as I slowed, the low chatter behind me muffled by the thick walls, light from the sconces dulling to amber along the floor, the hum of the house settling into its bones, my shoulder brushing faintly against old paint as I exhaled, measured, even, ready to keep going until a voice, low, almost careful, caught in the quiet. He wasn't part of them, not threaded into the laughter or the names being passed like favors at that table. Just someone crossing the space at the wrong time to see too much. The tray in his hand wobbling a moment before he steadied it, eyes lifting, meeting mine without challenge, blinking once, then again softer, and I saw him lean closer just enough to speak, voice carrying only between us, just enough to speak. Voice, that's what you always said, remember? My foot stopped before I told it to, heel hovering above the seam in the floor, breath hesitating at the top of my ribs, eyes pulling tight then opening, trying to adjust to the dim, the edge of his words scraping somewhere I thought I'd left sealed. The pause settling like dust between us, my lips parting without finding shape, closing on air, fingers twitching against the side of my coat where they'd laid flat. Now folding. I didn't answer, couldn't find the sound, only felt the shift inside the walls of my chest, a slow give, something unsticking that hadn't moved in too long. My gaze drifted sideways past him, catching the window's reflection, the room behind me intact, bright, untouched. But at the corner of the glass, a blur of me, sharper now. Listen. He didn't wait for my reply, just gave a nod so small it might not have happened, turned away with his tray steady again, boots tapping once, twice, fading back into the hum. The words had left behind hovering in the space between our footprints, unclaimed. My fingers closed around nothing, hand tightening slow, letting go slower, fabric of the coat creasing under the strain before smoothing out, chest falling with a quiet sigh, my eyes tracing the grain of the floor where it led away, following its line without moving my feet. Lashes lowering once, lifting to catch the light spilling in from the window, hitting my face at a new angle, cutting across my cheek in a pale strip that warned as I stood there, unmoving. A folded program slipped from someone's lap, fluttering onto the floor between chairs, pages spreading just enough to flash black lettering against white, bold, crisp. My name in full rank still there, not scrubbed, not hidden, the letters clear in the low light, catching the attention of the server who bent to pick it up. His hand paused, eyes narrowing as he read, then lifted, glancing at me. Not long, just enough to register, his lips parting before he could stop it, voice small but firm, commander, slipping out before he could swallow it back, the syllable clean in the hush that swallowed the room. Every other noise stuttered, the hum of conversation dropping mid-word, forks and knives hovering above plates, The tap of glass against glass, failing to complete its ring. Eyes turned, some slow, some snapping fast, catching me in the light that suddenly felt too direct, too honest. No shadows to hide the line of my jaw or the steadiness of my breath. I didn't move, hand resting open on the table, palm flat, thumb pressed against the wood's edge, feeling the grain as if it might steady me, eyes meeting theirs one by one, no blink, no flicker, the air thick with questions no one dared to voice. Someone cleared a throat that cracked halfway. Another's fingers tightened around a stem of glass until it creaked. They didn't laugh, no attempt to smooth it over with a joke or a cough. The silence sat heavy, filled every corner, the light overhead pooling around my shoulders like it had been waiting there all night, catching in my hair, on my cheekbone. Nowhere else to land. One or two tried to look away, but their gaze drifted back, pulled by something they hadn't seen before, or hadn't wanted to, the muscle along my jaw shifting once as I exhaled, slow, unhurried, not giving them any answer they hadn't already found on the paper, now folded tight in the server's hand. I let my fingers curl once on the table, then flatten, the tips resting calm, unmoving, my shoulders square, chin lifted just enough to meet every stare without invitation, without apology, eyes steady, not soft, watching them process what they now knew. No voice to fill the space. No need to claim what had already been spoken. My other hand reached for the glass, not to drink, but to place it back down precise. A dull thud against the linen. My breathing even, my mouth closing without tremor. The light didn't shift. It just stayed there, holding me exactly as I was, not waiting for permission anymore. I pushed the chair back slow, the sound of its legs scraping the floor softer than the hush that fell with it. No one spoke to stop me. No hands reached, just the subtle shift of bodies, giving space they once guarded so close. Eyes that had danced away before now, trying not to catch mine, sliding aside, blinking down, finding their silverware too fascinating to move. I let my hand rest on the back for a breath, fingers curling against the wood, then letting go, the weight leaving it steady, untouched. My other hand smoothing the napkin once, folding it with care it didn't need, creases pressed flat between thumb and forefinger before I set it down deliberate. Not tossed, placed, leaving it there like an answer no one asked forefinger, before I set it down like an answer. Someone cleared their throat, low, broken halfway. A voice tried my name once, stumbled softer this time, not the confident syllable they'd used all evening. Nothing demanding, just sound too thin to hold shape, dying before it reached me. I felt the air shift, the room bracing for something, but nothing came. Came soon for something, but nothing came. I didn't hurry, fingers brushing the rim of the glass I'd left full, untouched, the light catching on its surface, so it looked like it held fire. My reflection wavered there, clearer than it had been all night. I set it down with a small weight, enough to hear the dull thud against the cloth. Enough to remind us, both, it existed. My gaze moved across them, slow, not seeking anything, not asking, meeting eyes where they let me, finding the flinch, the swallowed words, the exhale held too long. No accusations needed, just the pause that made them shift on their chairs, adjusting collars, clearing throats that didn't need it, checking the space around them for the gap I'd left. I let my shoulders drop once, subtle, the breath leaving me easy this time. My feet finding the floor like it was meant for me. Steady, set, measured without apology. The air moved as I passed, but no one tried to fill it. No one dared to close it off again. The glow from the chandeliers falling across my back before dimming. The room learning its own quiet. Before dimming, the room learning its... The napkin stayed folded, the glass untouched, the chair square to the table. Waiting for no one. The eyes that had turned away drifting back, caught on that empty space, the silence thicker than before. one or two holding my shadow longer than they meant to. I didn't turn to see them, but felt it follow as I left. Steady, unbroken, nothing to say, nothing left to prove.